Good afternoon, everyone. It's Richard here. Welcome. Thanks for joining this impromptu webinar. I just want to start with a few comments before I go any further. I suppose the reason I put this together yesterday was all very last minute, was just seeing so many people suddenly announcing that they were working from home because of obvious events. And that's not easy or familiar for everyone. And I thought I would pull together some messaging, some best practice, some suggestions for how people can better deal with this new normal. A couple of points on logistics. I'm going to be recording this session, and that's so I can make the video available to people who aren't able to join us at this time right now. I know it's not convenient for everybody. And then we'll have a link that you'll be able to share with your colleagues, your friends and family who may find this useful. And that helps me avoid just running stacks and stacks of the same webinar over and over again. A little bit about me. If you've joined this not knowing who I am or what we do, I'm a workplace psychologist, and I founded a business called Work Life Psych about 5.5 years ago, and we focus on people development in the workplace across three broad themes: helping people be productive, helping them be professionally effective, and helping them manage their well-being. And obviously, what's going on now at the moment, involving lots of homework, means that it's particularly relevant to our interests and our experience. So I thought I'd like to share a bit of that this afternoon. I will reference one small piece of self-promotion, and that's the podcast that comes out every 2 weeks. It's called My Pocket Psych. It's available on all of the usual podcast apps and platforms. And just today, Wednesday the 18th, the latest in our series on developing psychological flexibility came out, and that's the final part in that series, and it's particularly relevant to the context at the moment, which is how better to deal with challenges and setbacks in life. So you can find that on the worklifepsych.com website. Or just search for My Pocket Psych. It's all out there. If you've got follow-up questions from today, and this is very much going to be on broadcast mode, if you've got follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with me via the website or just drop me a message on Twitter. As you can see there, I'm Dr._MacKinnon, or just send me a message via the contact form on worklifepsych.com. Okay, quick overview of what I wanted to cover in this session. And obviously this is a very big topic, so I've whittled it down to something I think we can manage in, between 30, 40 minutes, something like that. And hopefully this will spark some thoughts and reflections among your colleagues about how you can better adapt to these changing circumstances. I want to set the scene, put a bit of context around why I think this session is useful, cover off some practicalities of working from home, underline the importance of scheduling your work and your day when working from home, talk specifically about the importance of communication and how we need to communicate differently when we're working from home, and then finish up with a focus on maintaining well-being. And that's really just about working in a sustainable way when working from home, better dealing with the challenges that it poses to us, and developing an ongoing working style that you can do for some time. So to put all of this in a bit of context, quite obviously, this pandemic is having an enormous impact globally. And I know that's a slightly redundant point today, but I think what's really useful to reflect on is that this doesn't cause a problem for one business or one sector or one country. This is everywhere. And so I think it's really worth bearing in mind that what's making life difficult for us here today is having the same impact on our colleagues, on our clients, on our service providers, on our network, and all of their friends and all of their family. So one of the key messages I wanted to share today was about the need for a level of understanding and flexibility and basic human compassion for people who are working in more challenging circumstances. And because many of us are working from home, um, potentially some people got very short notice to do this and didn't have a lot of prep. And potentially it's the first time that they've done this, or the first time that they're doing this for an extended period. And working from home in an extended way is really quite different to the occasional morning when you maybe want to focus on a task and get some peace and quiet, or when you have to work from home for, say, a day or even an afternoon where you've got the plumber coming around or you have childcare challenges. This is going to be an ongoing home working experiment, basically. So it's a really important point I'd like everyone to keep in mind is that this is qualitatively going to be a different experience for many of us. Therefore, it's going to take a while to adapt to it. This underlines the need for us to understand each other's perspectives and also not beat ourselves up when we don't immediately hit the ground running and feel just as productive and just as great as we do when we're in our familiar workplace environment. Now, what I want to do is share some principles. These aren't rules, they're not magic bullets. And obviously, as with all things psychological in the workplace, there's no one size fits all solution here. So, what I'd like you to do is have a look at these points as we go through them, maybe revisit the recording of this to take some additional notes and think about what you would like to apply in your context, given how you live, where you live, what you do for a living. Take from this what you will, but it's definitely not a set of instructions for everyone today. And really importantly, to quote the great Dr. Leonard McCoy, damn it, Jim, I'm a psychologist. I'm not a physician. I'm not an epidemiologist. So when it comes to your well-being and exposure to this virus, please make sure you follow the expert public health guidance and don't take anything from this presentation as an instruction for what you should do. This is really about some things to reflect on to help you improve your experience and the experience of the people that work with you when working from home. Okay, well, let's start by looking at what can make working from home a bit challenging. Maybe a number of you who've dialed in this afternoon have had experience of working from home and can identify with this. Some of these may be quite straightforward, but I want to cover them off at the start to illustrate the kind of loaded deck many of us will be working with. First of all, we've got to deal with a different physical environment. And you may not be lucky enough to have the kind of home where you've got lots of spare space to set up a temporary work space. And so you'll be dealing with the challenges that come with being out of your comfort zone from a physical work perspective, and then dealing with some of the risks that come with that, say some of the ergonomic challenges of working. And I know some people I've spoken to in the last week, you know, one of the main challenges they've been dealing with has been, for example, working off a laptop when in their workplace they maybe had two very large monitors to support them. There's the fundamental disruption to our routine. And as much as we'd like to think we're very flexible as people, we do settle into a routine when it comes to the workplace. And that disruption can have quite an impact. It can be upsetting. So we're going to be working from a different environment in a different way. And then therefore there's a need to establish a new routine. Again, many of us will be sharing the home space with other people. It might be members of your family, you might be in a house share, but the point being, this is an ongoing working experience and working probably with other people. If they're not working, they're living there and it's their home as well. So the sharing of space could be a bone of contention. And what we want to do is underline the benefits of having conversations about some agreed working principles for working from home and not allowing the work to overtake the home. It is a place for everyone to live. The work will take place for a period of time, but it's not becoming your new office. Having access to resources is a challenge for some people. If you're working purely digitally, all you need is access to the internet. However, just yesterday, I came across someone who, through an accident with some builders on the street, lost connection to the internet in his home, and therefore all of the electronic resources he would normally rely on. But it's not just the tools; it's also the resources that we have in a shared workspace, knowledge and support from other humans. So we need to think of a way of getting access to those resources even when we're not in the shared physical space. There's a risk when working away from the office for a period of time when we're not used to that, that we might build up some unsustainable habits. I was going to call these unhealthy habits, but what I really mean is that you might work in a way that's really suitable for, say, an afternoon sprint or a couple of days, really knuckling down to finish something. But this is going to be the new normal. So, whatever working habits you cultivate when working from home, they need to work for you and for your colleagues in a way that could last months potentially. So, think long term in the working style that you cultivate when working from home. And of course, there's going to be some communications challenges. This will differ depending on what your existing workplace looks like. But for many people, communication can be as simple as looking above their monitor at the person at the desk opposite, turning to their left or their right and asking a brief question of someone, or just having a chat while making a tea or a coffee or bumping into someone in the corridor. Now, we're all being advised to physically isolate ourselves from society, from large groups, but that's not the same as social isolation. So we want to really double down on and emphasize the importance of ongoing communication when we're working from home. We can also miss out on some of the cues that we get in the workplace. And these do have an impact on our experience of work, whether we're really aware of them or not. So some of those workplace cues can be visible, people coming and going, noticing people packing up at the end of the day could be a cue for you to do the same. Noticing when people are taking a lunch break. Noticing when some of your colleagues have maybe got in a huddle to discuss something of interest to them. A lot of that's going to be missing. And so we need to replace those cues with something a little bit more explicit so that we can ensure we maintain a routine, that we have a sustainable way of working, and that we're not cut out or cut apart from everybody else. And so that we use communications technology to remain part of the conversation. There is a risk that we'll miss out on some social support. I was interviewed for a podcast series a few weeks ago, which was all about the isolation and loneliness that can come when working from home. Now, it was nothing to do with the coronavirus, but I think it's pretty timely. But the point there is that actually disconnect and loneliness can happen when we're in the middle of a crowd. So it doesn't necessarily need to happen when we're working from home. But if we don't remain in contact with our colleagues, if we knuckle down and focus on just our own concerns, we may miss out on some of that social support that we get from our colleagues. That's not necessarily problem solving. It's not necessarily the same as getting informational resources. It can be someone who just listens to you when you're facing a challenge, a setback, a problem, and lends you their ear for a few moments. And that can be really beneficial, sometimes more beneficial than actually getting some suggestions as to what you should do. I think the overarching challenging that we're facing here is that there's no agreed endpoint to this new way of working. We don't know when these governmental recommendations and the public health recommendations will change. So this is ongoing, and that can be a challenge for many of us who don't like the ambiguity, who don't like the uncertainty. So by all means, this is not a finite list of things that can make working from home challenging, but I wanted to draw attention to some of the more psychological aspects, because it's not just about grabbing your laptop and setting up shop at home. We need to be more planned. We need to be more intentional than that. So let me start with some practicalities. And this is really about getting some essential nuts and bolts in place, maybe to remove some of the more obvious challenges that we can face. Ideally, these are some things to think of before you leave the workplace. If you know you're going to be working from home from this point on, some things to bear in mind. A really basic point, but it's something I've come across time and again, is that people set up at home and not everything's working. So test the IT equipment and the connections that you need. Test them early and reach out for the support that you might need from your IT colleagues if things aren't working as planned. Make sure that you have the necessary contact details for all your colleagues and your clients and anyone else that you think you may need to be in contact with for a period of time. And this really isn't about relying on the digital information. It might be helpful for you to make a note of those key names and numbers or email addresses in a physical copy and take that with you. On a broader sense, take everything that you know or think you'll need with you. It's unlikely that it will be easy to get back into the workplace if everyone's been asked to work from home. So have a good think about what kind of information, and that includes very practical things like passwords, login information. Make sure you've got all of that with you. It may be harder to get someone to support you with that stuff while you're working from home. Gather the small things that you use daily. Maybe make a checklist of the things that you know you need every day and pop that in a bag and bring it with you. And here I'm talking about the very practical things like chargers for your devices, maybe a notebook that you use regularly that's got some key information in it. Anything that you know you come into contact with daily in the standard workplace, pop it in a bag and bring it with you. It's worth having a conversation as well about the things that really can't be done when you're at home. There may be some tasks, there may be some activities that really are workplace dependent. And it's worth flagging those before going home, if at all possible, so that a plan B can be put in place. So once you're home, once you're working from your own home, some very practical things to bear in mind. And again, there's no one size fits all. I just want to flag a few things for you to reflect on. It's useful to have a room in your home where you're going to work from, or a regular space within your home. And what that means is one that's going to be suitable that you can use for the long term. Really, I would caution against using your bedroom for this if at all possible, because very basically, if you think about it, you could spend 8 or 9 hours in your bedroom working and then get a break for a couple of hours and then you're back in your bedroom to sleep. It's not great for quality or duration of sleep to build up a strong association between work and your bedroom. So try and use another space in your home. And I know that some people will be lucky enough to have a home office or a study or a spare bedroom. Many people won't, and it will be about setting up shop at the kitchen table. But make it a regular space that you're going to set up and then put away at the end of the day. But I'll come back to that a little bit later. Think about how ergonomically safe and supportive the setup of your workspace is. Remember, this is not going to be a short-term thing. So make sure that you've got neutral posture, that you're supported in the right way. So lying down on the couch is not ideal. Making sure that your back has support, making sure you're able to touch the ground with your feet. There's some great resources on the Health and Safety Executive's website, hsc.gov.uk, all about setting up safe and healthy workstations. So see how well you can match what it is you have in your existing workplace. Now, if you share where you live with other people, whether they work or they don't work, it's really useful to agree some ongoing working principles for how this is going to work. You may have some very different perspectives on what working from home can look like. You may have encountered this in the past where you were working from home and someone else in your life assumed that you would be available to do domestic chores or support them with something else they were doing or engage in childcare. Now, this is very different. This is not a day or an afternoon. This is going to be ongoing. So things that you could agree, things that you should reflect on would be, look, in general, what time am I going to start work? What does it mean if I close this door? Or when do I need a bit more peace and quiet so I can make these important phone calls? Just exchange expectations of what it's going to be like for all of you who live together. Now, you may find it useful to set up a routine with those people if they're working as well, other members of your family or people in your house share. It's better to talk about this up front because otherwise it could lead to a level of conflict or misunderstanding. This is very subjective, but do what you can to minimize the distractions in your environment. Now, your workplace might be quite a distracting environment to begin with, but it's probable that you don't have a TV blaring in the corner of your office. So make sure that you're trying to replicate that experience when you're working from home. Don't assume you're going to be able to concentrate on the day job if you've got 24-hour rolling news playing, or you've got music playing, or you are distracting yourself by looking at slightly stressful social media. Once you're in situ, um, you may realize there's something missing from your setup. Make sure you've really got the basics to get the job done properly on an ongoing basis. If you discover after a few days you're missing something, reach out to your colleagues, see if you can get something ordered. It may be something to improve the ergonomic setup. It may be something to make life slightly easier, like a larger monitor. Whatever it is, don't put up with not having those tools for the long term. It will have a negative impact on your experience of work, your productivity, and potentially even your well-being. And at the end of the day, think about how you can clear work away. Unless you've got an office dedicated at home where you can just close the door, it's beneficial for you to think of a way that you can gather up those work-related objects, notebooks, laptop, all of that stuff, and clear it away so you can return your home to being a home and not an office. So when it comes to planning your workday, there's some very basic principles to bear in mind. Uh, it's basic, and there's a lot of commentary on this topic online, and I think it's a bit of an ongoing joke for people who occasionally work from home. But it's beneficial to get dressed for work, even if you never see another human being. You're giving yourself the cue that it's time to work. So it's not that ideal to sit around in your pajamas all day. Get dressed for work in the way that you would prepare yourself for a day in the office or whatever your existing workplace is. Try and replicate your routine as much as you can. And there is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel here, because if you're working from home, you don't have necessarily commuting time. So you have some extra time in your routine, but don't assume that you're going to be able to shake it up completely because you're working from home, because you're probably interdependent with other colleagues. So try and match what it is you've been doing in the office and replicate that at home. One way of doing that, when you're missing those cues in the workplace that I mentioned earlier, is to establish some rituals that you can have at the start and the end of your day. Rituals are just very simple behaviors, tasks that you'll do to signal this is the start of my working day and this is the end of my working day. And it could be as simple as I have my morning cup of tea and it's at the table, and as soon as I finish my tea, that's the start of my working day. And at the end of my day, maybe one of the rituals is packing everything back up and putting it in a cupboard, and that says this is the end of my working day. It might be to go for a walk around the block. It might be to pop on some music, something that you'll build up as a habit that says to you, that's the end of it. And this is really important because you're not necessarily going to be leaving your workplace. You're going to still be at home. So it's useful. I know from people that have been working at home for years, they'll do things like go for a walk around the block. They'll make a phone call to a friend. They'll change their clothes from work clothes to more relaxed clothing. Something just sends the signal, it's the end of the day. It's also useful as a manifestation of your working hours to the people that you live with. And it gives out the sign, it's the signal. I'm working, I finished working. This is really important regardless of your job. When you're working from home, it may be that you can't achieve as much as you can when you are in the shared workplace with your colleagues. Maybe things are slowed down. Maybe you're accessing a remote server to get information. Maybe you can't get hold of people as quickly as you'd like. So it's important that you adjust your expectations and manage the expectations of others, at least in early days, about what can be done in any given day. And keep an eye on what kind of a pace you're working at, and so that you're not approaching this as some kind of unsustainable sprint, but a manageable, productive, typical working day at home. One way of doing this is that you start your day by identifying the absolute key priorities for that day. Make a list. This is not so much about remembering to do them, but having a list that you can cross these things off. And when you've got them done, you won't have the nagging doubt that I don't feel I've got much done today. The evidence will be there in front of you. This isn't really about defending yourself or proving to other people that you've been busy or productive. It's to enable you to avoid the trap of continuing to work way past the end of a standard working day. One of the challenges that most knowledge professionals face in 2020 is knowing when to end their working day, because there will always be more work. There'll always be more to do. So identify those priorities, focus on those priorities, and when you're done, maybe there'll be some other things you can get done before it's time to wrap up the day. But it's important that you do wrap up that day. And on that point, keep an eye on the time, not in a clock watching way, but keep an eye on how much time you're spending on tasks and how much time you're spending at work. Whereas you might have had a commute to break up your day before, and maybe a lunch with colleagues, it's very, very easy when you're working from home to work longer. And maybe that's not problematic if you're working from home for a few days. But again, this could be the new normal for quite some time. So keep an eye on it, log your working hours. You'll be able to look back on that and assure yourself, if nobody else, that you're getting things done. Now, that saved commuting time could be a real bonus. I would challenge everyone to think about what they could do with that would contribute to their well-being, their life satisfaction, rather than a couple more hours of work. So maybe you could get in some exercise in the morning. Maybe it's about getting a walk outside if that's appropriate. Maybe it's about spending some time with your family instead of just starting work earlier and finishing it later. But really, if you're replicating your existing working routine, you're going to have some extra time there. Think about what you can do and use that time as sort of the bonus of working from home. Let's talk next about the importance of communication and maintaining that when you're working from home. Whether you're leading a team, whether you're part of a team, it's really important that you maintain contact with them throughout the day. Different firms, different organizations will use different tools. There's instant messaging. Pretty much everyone on the planet has email now. There's phones, there's video calls. There's all kinds of ways that we can keep in touch with people. It's important that you use those tools and that you don't unavoidably isolate yourself, because again, it's physical separation, not social isolation that we're talking about. Have a discussion about how you're going to communicate. One example I would share with you would be for managers or team leaders to be really clear that when they check in on people to ask how they are, this is not some way of testing that they're actually working. They're not micromanaging the team. They're just checking in to see how they're getting on from a pastoral managerial perspective. Maybe agree that you'll share a lunch break time, and that you won't try and do anything urgent between certain hours. On a related note, maybe clarify how you're going to use the various communications channels. So one would be, if I need to share some information with you, I'll send you an email. If I need to ask you a quick question, I might send you something on Slack or another instant messenger. If it's really critical, I'll call you. And just having those principles in place will mean that each of us will be less anxious about keeping our eyes on all of these communications channels all the time, and we can fall back on, if it is really urgent, someone will call me. Because you may miss out on some of that face-to-face communication, you may be relying more on the written word. It could be useful to think about what you can do to make yourself more explicit and more easily understood. You know what it's like when you're making a phone call or when you're sending an email. Your facial expression isn't obvious there. So just reflect on what you might need to do differently when it comes to communicating from home. And I'll bang on about it because it's so important. Keep that social side of things going. Technology can allow us to have a shared experience, even though we're in very, very different environments physically. So maybe ask your colleagues if they want to take a coffee break at the same time, or they want to schedule lunch at the same time, and get the video on and just talk to each other. Especially if you live by yourself, it's really, really beneficial to have some of that shared non-work social contact. Friends of mine, we regularly have brunch at the weekend. We're not able to do that, so we're going to have a virtual brunch this weekend. We're going to use video conferencing. At each side, we'll have something to eat and drink, and we'll just catch up using that. Is it as great as going out somewhere? No, it is not, but it's something that is possible, and it means that we can maintain some level of social contact during the week. It's useful to signpost to the people that you work closely with when you're starting and finishing your day, or if you're going to be out of contact for a little while. If you know that that's the case, maybe you do want to turn everything off and focus on one task for a little while. Just let people know that you're doing that. It can be concerning to colleagues or team leaders if someone just goes dark and disappears for an extended period of time. So just indicate, just signpost when you're starting and you're finishing your day. Not everyone is going to hit the ground running with this. Um, some colleagues will be very, very unfamiliar with doing any kind of work in their home. Some will have a very strong preference to keep work in the workplace, and this will be very unsettling for them. So I'd encourage everyone to be patient and understanding with those that are going to take a little while to adjust to this new way of working. This represents a big change. While we've got a global health emergency, there's also some very basic well-being points I'd like to bring to your attention, just specifically with regard to working from home. Speak up. Um, Ask for help when you feel you need it. Reach out and speak to someone that you work with. If you're stuck, if you can't find something, if you're feeling under pressure, if you're feeling isolated, if you feel this new way of working isn't working for you, it's okay to talk about this stuff, but the only way that people will know is if you put your hand up. So do ask for help, and everyone will be making some adjustments. There are no silly questions. Keep the communication lines open and look for that help. Very basically, make sure that you step away from your screen on a regular basis and move around a bit. Again, for many people who will be working from home, it will be knowledge intensive work, and that can automatically be very sedentary. Whether you're reading a lot or you're writing a lot, you're sitting down. So maybe set some alarms on your smartphone or on a clock, and just use those alarms to stand up, walk around, have a stretch, get a glass of water. You might automatically do that in the workplace when you see other people doing it. You're going to miss those cues. So just create them as a habit for yourself at home. I'm not a dietitian either, but it can be very tempting to eat and drink in a way that we don't normally when we're out of our comfort zone. And this particularly applies to things like business travel, but this is not an excuse for us to reward ourselves with food and drink because we're putting up with something or we're experiencing some discomfort or some anxiety. It's not really sustainable. On the one hand, we might be tempted to eat and drink more. On the other hand, it's very easy to fall into the trap of forgetting to eat and to remain hydrated. So have a think about what your standard working day looks like and try and replicate it from a food and drink perspective at home as well. You can feel isolated and disconnected when working from home. So just remember what it is that you've got absolute control of. And the punchline to that is that you've got absolute control of very little in life if you think about it. Most of the things that we do in work, we're trying to influence a situation. We're trying to influence other people, influence a decision being made. And when we're not physically with people, that can feel even more difficult. Fundamentally, the only thing that we have control over is how we respond to what's going on around us. So focus on managing yourself, not trying to influence or change things very, very distant from you. And that includes what's going on around us outside in the middle of this pandemic. Some of you may be spending more time reading the news. Some of you may be already benefiting from stepping away from the news. Just remain aware of how much of this you're consuming. Maybe give yourself some breaks during the day when you're not getting news alerts, you're not searching social media for updates. It's a fast moving story, but you're not contributing to your own psychological well being by taking most of your day and reading bad news about it, particularly if it's things that are happening nowhere near you that can still have the same emotional resonance. And make sure that you get that information from trusted sources. It's a message that's being hammered home by governments. This is unfortunately a time when rumors spread like wildfire. So just be aware there's no perfect amount to consume, but just have a think before you automatically open Twitter or go to a news website. One of the challenges I know many people can face when they work from home is exercise. It's important to keep moving, but if you are someone who exercises regularly, you might have to think creatively. If you're still able to get outside, and if public health advice permits that, get out and go for the walk, get the fresh air, go for a run. We are supposed to be isolating ourselves, so we're talking about solitary pursuits. If you can't, think about what exercise you can get indoors. And if there's one thing YouTube has taught us is that we need never join a gym again. There's plenty of content online to show us how to exercise in a room at home with next to no equipment. Even if you're not a very active person, it's not going to be good for you to spend all of your time seated for the extended working day and your evening. So just consider what kind of an exercise that you can build in to your day, even if it's climbing the stairs a few times, walking around your home, or getting outside. One of the things that we can do when we're trying to deal with a difficult situation, in addition to controlling it, is to have some very firm plans. And let's just agree now that those plans that we have for making things work are likely to be disrupted. And that could be down to anything. I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess today because things are changing so fast. But just acknowledge that the plans you put in place when it comes to work could be disrupted, and try and be flexible and adapt and understand that as much as possible. I'll reflect back on this concept of psychological flexibility. We may do a follow-up webinar session on that topic, but you can learn all about the benefits and the ways of developing this flexibility via the podcast, My Pocket Psych. One mental perspective that you can take on this is to consider how you're going to look back on today from the future. How would you like to have handled this? Ideally, would you like to look back and say, I panicked, I took out my emotions on my colleagues, I distracted myself all day, I found myself working extra long hours, I had arguments at home? Or would you like to say, I think I took things in my stride, I balanced the relationships I have in my life, I made sure it didn't negatively impact on my family? Think about that to identify those preferred or ideal responses. And this is really all about the person you want to be. And on that note, make sure that when you're finished work that you get stuck into your personal life with a level of intent. So it may be trickier to engage in hobbies and pastimes, but think about what you're actively going to do and engage with outside of work. And that can help it feel less like being on a hamster wheel all day. And then when you've got that signal to yourself, the working day is over, your evening lies ahead of you and you have plans. You're going to do something with that. So a few thoughts to wrap up with. Whatever you start doing today or tomorrow or next week when it comes to working from home, iterate. Find different ways of doing it and experiment until you find a routine and a way of working that works for you. And it may be that colleagues tell you about their way of working. It doesn't necessarily work for you. That's fine. It's quite subjective, but be open to experimenting until you find a way that works really well for you and the people that you live with. If you do discover something that's really helping you, let your colleagues know, let your friends know. Maybe you come across a new video calling app. Maybe you identify an easier way to share files, or you've discovered some trick of dealing with your email. Share that stuff. We could all do with some positive news in the workplace. really fundamentally, look out for each other. Your colleagues, no matter how much doubt you have about this, it's pretty safe to say your colleagues will be experiencing something similar. So whether you're leading the team, you're a member of the team, check in with people, see how they're doing, and be there for each other to listen when they're facing challenges. Keep the conversations going. Look for any opportunity to engage in some kind of communication with your colleagues to reduce the chance of isolation. It's a very brave and open person that says, I'm feeling lonely. So it may come in different guises. So if someone wants to chat, take a moment to have a chat with them. More than anything else, as I alluded to a moment ago, focus on what really matters in your life. Think about the kind of person you want to be, the kind of life you want to live. And I would have no hesitation in assuming that when you think about what really matters to you, it's not about the number of unread emails in your inbox. It's not about the duration of some video calls with clients on the other side of the world. It's about living your best life and engaging in purposeful and rewarding relationships and looking after those close to you at home and at work. So really keep an eye on that stuff. And in closing, just one message I'd share with everyone, which is this question we can ask ourselves when we're feeling a bit stuck or when we're not really sure what we should do when faced with a challenge or a setback. Ask yourself what you would do if you were at your best. What would the best version of myself do now? Would they do something that's both brave and uncomfortable but meaningful? Would they reach out the hand of communication to a colleague who has gone a bit quiet? Would they offer to lead a new initiative? Would they know when to end their working day and spend it with their family? The answers are many and varied, but just ask yourself, what would you do if you were at your best? Okay, we've come to the end of the content that I wanted to share today. As I say, I've done this at at the sort of last minute, short notice. I just thought I wanted to share some principles of working from home with an interested audience. It looks like, I'm looking at the number of people who've dialed in, that there's quite a few people interested. As I said, I know not everyone could join us today. I have recorded this. I will be making a copy of it available online, and I will publish the link to that on Twitter and LinkedIn. So keep an eye out for that if that's how you came across me. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I just close by wishing you all the very best in the coming weeks. Stay safe, stay healthy, and wish you every success. Thank you. Bye-bye.